So, Shadowverse Worlds Beyond. The game that's had the Cygames fans, the Shadowverse fans on the edge of their seats for the past year? More than a year? Truly, the expectation and the results is truly beyond. Anyways, we can start with the elephant in the room. The big
Right.
picture that everyone's been talking about, the monetization. And to me, the biggest issue is the changes to vialing system. You requiring 3 copies to even start vialing.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with that. It seems like an unnecessary and slightly arbitrary restriction to really put on the vialing system.
It is really weird. I've never seen a game limit or restrict your vialing to such an extent, right?
I mean, to be the devil's advocate, though, I suppose, it is worth noting that I think many new players would often come into the game and they would open their packs, vial literally everything they didn't need, and just, I guess, immediately go to building a meta deck, which they net decked.
It is a fine line, like a balancing act, because while you're restricting these free-to-play players, the as whales, you would say, you would call, would just buy their way through it.
Absolutely.
But
But
at the same
the
time, I
whales,
don't think that changes. Like, the whales are going to whale regardless.
yeah, precisely. So, I guess to place an arbitrary restriction on players that don't desire it, it seems kind of misguided, I think.
Yeah.
Because if the whales want to, if they want to skip that whole process of exploring other archetypes, exploring different decks, seeing what is there to see, and then trying to slowly carve out their niche, I suppose, within the game, like that's just not something that will happen. And I don't think you can really force people to do that either. And it seems to me like this is a rather poor attempt to accomplish that, where they want people to have, I suppose, what you might call a more organic experience. They want people to just kind of have a more organic experience towards like understanding the game and learning the various archetypes available and the various options they have available. And I suspect that might be why they have the whole quest line you need to complete in order to get your select your starter deck, I suppose, for this.
Oh, to test them?
entry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you, as a new player, I suppose you're supposed to go into practice or go into the game and see what the quirks of each class is, assess that, and come to some sort of conclusion as to what the nature of that is, and the nature of the classes is, and what I suppose is most fitting for their playstyle. And I think you often see something like this when you're looking at, I guess you might call like schoolyard trading card games, where if you're just playing Yu-Gi-Oh or something, or Magic in the schoolyard, it's just whatever you can get your hands on, and you just cobble
Yeah.
a deck out of it, and that just kind of, and it's just whatever you jive with, right? Like there's no concept of what's good, what the meta is, what you're playing against, what the field is like. It's just you with your dumbass deck.
There is also the fact that it is a new game with a developed audience and with a lot of new players coming into the game, and if their expectation is to just be free to play and be able to compete at that level like immediately, like, yeah, the new player experience is going to be rough because there are a lot of veterans from Shadowverse, and I think that should be a bit expected on top of that, on top of people whaling for the first couple of days. It does need to balance itself out. The matchmaking, the ladder, everything, everyone will be put in their respective spots.
Right.
Same thing can be said to like other games like Apex, whenever they do a rank rework and stuff like that, like the first 2 days, first week even, is a huge mess. Everyone's always complaining, oh, we're in bronze and we're playing against Diamond Plus and Masters, whatever. But it will hopefully balance itself out.
I think whenever there is a perceived imbalance in gameplay experience, people will complain about it. Whether that
Of course.
discrepancy exists or not is obviously up for debate.
Mhm.
However, um, it definitely is something worth considering, and I suppose if a large number of players feel that way, there's probably some truth to it. I think
Yeah.
at some point there is some importance in the distribution of players, I suppose you might say. Because like, what is the ratio of new players to, I guess, veteran players, and then what is the ratio of like free-to-play players to whales, right? And
Mhm.
um, I think if your experience is bad every now and then, it shouldn't be that like it's probably not that big of an issue. That it just you just ran into someone that is better than you, I guess, in some regards, and I think that happens in any game you play. There's very few games I think where you'll be perfectly evenly matched, and I think any game where both contestants are perfectly and utterly evenly matched is probably not one that's that enjoyable to watch anyways. Uh, After all, I think if that is the case, those games, said games, will end in a draw, or if they're a solved game, whoever is
Or is first.
what what's that called? Yeah, usually it's whoever is first will win, right?
There
Or
is some small margin of advantage that one player will always have in that sense. On the
think,
topic of the player base, I'm sure there's a lot of new
right.
players, because I don't know if you saw the all-time peak, but it's right now on Steam alone, Shadowverse 2 is 100k plus a peak. I don't know about right now, but the peak for the past since Shadowverse 1 was on Steam was only around 25k. So
Oh,
the difference is huge. This game is bringing in really good numbers, and keep in mind that the target audience is, I believe it's still for mobile gamers. So
absolutely.
that number is not even including people playing on mobile.
I think it has a number of factors going for it, right?
Hmm.
First of all, I think the game itself, I think, looks quite lovely. I think for graphically, anyhow. I think I have very little gripes in terms of graphics, and I think anyone who enjoys that kind of anime aesthetics will have little to no issue with the graphics.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I think Shadowverse itself is a game with quite a bit of history to it, and I think it has garnered quite a bit of fame. I think even among people that don't necessarily play the game and are just tangentially aware of the, I guess, like gaming
Cygames
spheres.
IP is quite extensive.
Yes, precisely. Um, and I think
No
like
Pokemon, no Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's still up there.
yeah, I mean like there's also the thing with Granblue as well, right? Like
Grand Blue, Rage of Bahamut.
yeah, and I think for anyone who was interested in Shadowverse before and felt like they were out of their depth because it's a game that had um, quite a bit of history to it, and as a result could be very difficult to approach, right? Given that the player base would have been relatively well established, people would have had large collections. I think it would have been relatively difficult for maybe a new player by themselves to make forays into um, the original game at the
Hmm.
state it was in,
Hmm.
especially with how combo heavy and I guess knowledge heavy the game was.
Yeah.
Um, I think it would have been quite the substantial challenge. However, with this game kind of just wiping everything anew, I would be inclined to suggest that um, it is quite reasonable to conclude that uh, people who may have been daunted by that may see this as an opportunity for them to actually get into this game that they previously may have thought was quite unapproachable.
Yeah. Plus, they had 2 animes and a physical card game. That
Oh,
a
yeah,
really
that too.
good advertisement for the game. And if people didn't want to play that one, they're going to come to this one, right? So
I suspect that's the case.
a large part.
That's my
Yeah, there's a good chunk.
speculation.
Yeah. Plus, I was seeing a lot of, I guess, refugees from other card games like Legends of Runeterra.
I don't know. I think every single digital card game has had its own share of issues. At least that's how I've perceived things.
I do see a lot of people talk about how Master Duel is very generous. I see a lot of people mention how the new Pokemon trading card game or collecting card game is pretty generous. I'm not sure.
Right.
I've never played that one, so I can't speak about that one. But if I remember
Right,
when I played Master Duel, you did get quite a bit of gems to roll packs.
It's true, but I think it's all a matter of relativity, right?
Yeah.
It all depends on what game you came from, right?
Yeah.
What game have you played where, you've been wronged so dearly that some of these games feel like they may be generous or not generous, right? Or,
Yeah. And I think that's a large part of why people are so negative about Worlds Beyond is because they came from OG Shadowverse, which is famous for being very generous.
Absolutely. I think I'd agree with
The
that.
vialing, the gold.
I mean, this perception, I think that's a very important aspect to discuss, I think, because, yeah, I think part of it is because we as players who play Shadowverse are so accustomed to the generosity of the game that we find such issues with the game having changed in such a manner, right? And I think there's no greater example of this than to look at MP, who just started playing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking with MP, and he saw the number of gems you received, well, packs you received just for starting the game, and he was mentioning how he thought the game was quite generous compared to what Magic offered you. And I think that is a testament to just the human experience and just the relativity of things, I suppose, on whether something is perceived as generous or not, right? I don't know. I do think that is definitely an interesting aspect to look at. And if we look at it that way, it might not necessarily be as stingy as, people might suggest, or it might be more so than people suggest, right?
Yeah, maybe. Like, for Master Duel, my biggest issue with it was the vialing system as well. I didn't like the only ultra rare or URs could disenchant into URs, so you had to get 3 URs to craft 1 UR. Although I think they gave you a lot of packs. It felt that way, I think.
Yeah,
But if you needed to
you're
craft
absolutely
a
right with
UR, like there was a lot of URs that I needed to craft. I think it's in the side deck
that. Yeah, there were a lot of
or the
staples.
sink. Yeah, and I just couldn't
The
craft
extra
those
deck.
because the extra deck. I just could not make a lot of them because, well, you didn't roll for it, and the way you get the specific packs to roll for your archetype was also interesting, different.
Yeah, it was. You had
say?
to get the, I guess, key, you might call it, to unlock the secret pack for your archetype. Yeah. Which
There's a lot
usually,
of steps
yeah, it usually
to
just
build a
involved,
deck.
yeah, it usually just involved you crafting an SR of whatever archetype you were
Yeah,
going to craft once you built up a substantial amount of currency, I suppose.
yeah, but it was a lot of steps, and if you couldn't use those currencies to make a key, which then to roll for the UR, it was a lot of steps at that time. I don't know if it's changed. Can't speak
No,
about
I
that.
think it's still the same.
It's about the same then, yeah. So that being said, even though people say there's a lot of that, maybe that game's very generous, there are, or at least I found that there was a lot of hassle to it.
I I've heard different things about that. I've heard that the game's generous at the start. That's what I've
Hmm.
heard about Master Duel. And I think I might be inclined to agree to some extent because they definitely do front load
The
a lot of the
gems.
gems and I
Yeah.
guess just the rewards you can get. But I suppose that makes sense because the people that need it the most are definitely the new players. So
Yeah.
um, now it does mean that, for established players it's going to be more challenging to acquire whatever it is that they want, but
But low key, it's good for the player base to capture an audience. So
yeah. I don't know. It's interesting because I think for Yu-Gi-Oh um there's a there's a physical counterpart for the card game, right? So I think it's
it does have a much larger IP.
yeah, I think for people that are getting into Yu-Gi-Oh, they're probably more interested in just getting whatever deck that they're most familiar with that they usually play on the regular and paper, or whatever thing they want to test and just play that. Unlike with Shadowverse, where this might actually be their first time playing it, and this might be
Yeah.
um, you know, yeah, there's no real other way to enjoy Shadowverse, I guess, other than maybe Evolve. But
Evolve.
honestly,
Hee.
I don't think that is quite the same
The
game. So
anime, would that be a way to
I mean, that is one way that you could theoretically enjoy it. However, that
it's
really
like
isn't
the
for the gameplay
introduction with Yu-Gi-Oh,
experience.
the anime.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, before the anime, the card game didn't even. Yeah, I believe the card game didn't even exist. I think the card game was one of the random games that was featured in the anime. I mean, the manga, if memory serves me right. I believe the manga originally was just supposed to showcase a number of like board games or things of that
Hmm.
nature, um, but I think Yu-Gi-Oh as a concept seems to have stuck around instead, right? After
Yeah.
all, they constantly say the king of games, but they literally only play one game, and I think that's just a testament to its roots.
Yeah. But on the note of new player experience, you're not necessarily a new player, but what are your thoughts on that? Because I, for one, have not played a lot of the game yet, having to pretend to be an adult. But
Mhm.
I've seen quite a few comments, and it's quite mixed. I think people are having fun with the game, and then there's a large majority that are just getting absolutely railed by the veterans, the whales. It's an interesting mix
Um,
right now.
I mean, I also haven't played that much in all fairness, but for what little of ranked I have played, um, I've pretty much only seen Portal Sword and Haven.
Hmm.
I think Haven makes a lot of sense as counter meta, and I think
Are very meta.
the other two feel very strong. Let me tell you, because even as counter meta, it doesn't. And yeah, as uh, as I'm sure, I'm not sure if I've mentioned, but I am playing Haven for the record. But that's just because I played Haven in Shadowcraft 1 as well. So it's unfortunate that I don't have an alternate win condition. My beloved Lapis has been freed from Stone, who done this to her. It's absolute criminal behavior. But either way, here's to here's to hoping Lapis gets in statute again. But either way, I do think that regardless of their efforts and despite the systems that I think they have put in place in an attempt to get people to diversify and just play whatever that has been offered to them. There is a staggering number of players that are just playing the meta. Perhaps ranked is not a very good snapshot because I think the ranked will draw out the most competitive players, and I suspect that the casual players, the players that are the newer players, the players that are likely to just, you know, cobble together whatever they have available, will not be um, will not be in that space. So I suppose that makes perfect sense for me to not see any of them, um, and for me to only see those aforementioned mentioned decks. But even in the park, I think basically everyone I saw in the park was, because there was a goal to there was a quest to spectate 5 matches. So I went around and spectated said matches, and I think basically every single deck I saw was Portal, Sword, or Haven. There was one guy that was playing Shadow, and he got the thrashing of a
Abyss.
lifetime. He got
Yeah.
absolutely destroyed. Like, it wasn't even close. I think he found himself in the wrong neighborhood. You know, the sword player he was playing against absolutely just demolished him.
I wonder if Abyss just has an identity crisis right now.
That's possible. That's possible, given that it's a amalgamation of two different
Because it does
archetypes,
have
right?
the shadow cards given
Yeah.
Cerberus, and it does have the blood cards as well. And then it also has the bunch of cards that give bat. And it has a bunch of cards that give like ghouls.
I think it might have been trying to accommodate for both, and as a result, it's just kind of
It's
ended
not
up,
as well
especially,
defined.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
especially with the it given the small card pool at the moment, I think it's just failed to do either. You know, it's just bad at doing both.
Probably a similar thing with like Rune with Earthright and Spell Boost, right? Like, because you mostly probably see Spell Boost. I don't think
Um,
there's
yeah, I don't think there's much
a
of a
finisher
Earthright
support
deck
for
right
Earthright or
now.
something like that.
At least I didn't see one. It's possible there is one. I won't deny the possibility, but um, not convinced that it would be particularly good compared to like what Spell Boost has available to in terms of tools. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I will also say I ran into exactly one person playing Forest while I was playing ranked, and um, I completely ran them over, and it hardly felt like a deck compared to uh, a lot of the portal decks and a lot of the sword decks I played against.
Hmm.
Unfortunately,
Which is
and I think
interesting.
a lot of the games I did win against Swordcraft in particular, it was usually I ran them out of cards, I ran them out of threats, and
As Haven
then they
does.
just and yeah, it was pretty anticlimactic, I guess. And as for Portal, I'd like to say it was more or less the same deal. But yeah, that's certainly how it felt. Um,
Hmm.
it's
But it's
def-
interesting what you're seeing, and I think though those decks are true in being probably the strongest, I also see that a lot of other decks up in the ranks, like you don't see much spell boost. I think spell boost is quite strong right now. I've
it
seen lists
probably
saying force
is.
is quite strong. Uh, don't know the rest, but it did look quite diverse in power level, except for Abyss.
There is probably truth to that. However, I will also point out that, you know,
The
in
difficulty,
these
right?
well, there's difficulty, but other than difficulty, these like people who want to grind ranked and their only purpose is to achieve a high rank, for those people, historically aggro has been the best option,
Hmm.
and I think Sword and Portal are capable of winning the game the quickest, and
Yeah,
as a result, I think it just is.
quickest, maybe most consistent.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it, and I think they're generally easier decks to play than I think the Spell Boost or the
definitely easier than Forest.
Forest or Spell Boost. I think.
Yeah.
I guess you could make an argument for Spell Boost, but I think there is some sequencing that I think isn't really a
As intuitive.
consideration in the yeah
Yeah.
yeah I think especially for newer players. I think it just is a lot more intuitive to go, oh, I put my creature down and I attack you with creatures. Ooh. Or like, just combining your Gundam together and then just like slapping your opponent in the face. They better heal or else they're fucking dead. I,
But I
I
think,
I think the games
yeah.
I did lose against Portal and Sword, it usually was by just one turn. I think I was one turn off of stabilizing and just barely edged me out. And usually it was for exact damage, but I think in some number of those games, I could see lines where I genuinely did misplay, and had I sequenced better, or had I known what was being played in the field better, it wouldn't have been as big of an issue. I think that much is true.
Well, yeah. Uh, Also returning player, familiarity with system, new
Yeah,
game, second day, first second day. There's a lot of stuff, but either way, like online, there's a lot of nuances to all these the
oh, absolutely.
negativity, I guess, surrounding the game right now. A lot of perspective given backgrounds of everyone's experiences.
I I think at the moment there's just a lot of um, I do hope that the ranked ladder does diversify to some extent as I go up it, but
Hmm.
it certainly is an experience to be playing that. Playing against just Portal and Sword all the time.
You'd be really
Two
good at
matchups
it.
I've historically hated playing against those matchups because they're real nail biters, and
They are, yeah.
um, I think the early game removal is not as good as it used to be in the prior in the original Shadowverse.
No black in scripture.
Yeah, no black in
No
scripture. Bring back
black
my
in
beloved black in
scripture.
scripture, you cowards. First they uninstatue my Seraph, and now they get rid of my black in scriptures. Come on, bro. I think the sweepers are better in this game compared to the prior entry. I think Themis being replaced with Unholy Vessel and the ability to recur Unholy Vessel off of a 7 play point 5/7 with Ward seems quite powerful to me.
Hmm.
But and I definitely can see how it could be frustrating for a player playing against it. Um, but at the same time, the fact that some of these matchups necessitate such obscene sweepers or
Hmm.
such an obscene density of sweepers is uh, kind of a testament to how well some of these decks rebuild boards or build boards in the first place, I think.
Yeah.
Whether that's an issue or not is a completely separate subject, I think. Um, that's not really that's not really my place to discuss, I suppose. Yeah, but I
But
think in terms of new player experiences, you don't. I think kind of taking a look at what how MP was digesting the game is probably a good way to, I guess, gauge it. It does seem like he was kind of frustrated by some aspects.
Is that because of
Because,
game mechanic or because of like just
well, I think just the
the
fact that
deck
he didn't have all
level
the
and
pieces. Yeah,
yeah.
like I think especially against my deck, uh, there would be moments where it reasonably did not look like he could win the game,
Mm-hmm.
which is an awful feeling, I think. Because I think we
Yeah, I
concluded
saw him
that,
scoop your ass. Saw him scoop
yeah,
out of there.
yeah, I mean, it makes sense, I think.
Yeah,
Like his deck
for
is
sure.
just trying to get across the finish line, I think, and I think in a lot of ways, all the healing that Haven has access to, yeah, and all the defensive pieces. I love that he was like, yeah, I just don't think I can get a creature to stick for over a turn, and I just thought to myself, yeah, you know what, you're right. Like, you literally can't get anything to stick for over a single turn. Well, you can't expect anything to survive a single turn cycle, which is kind of absurd to say, I guess, but um,
That's part of the planning, part of the game sense. It's what it is.
yeah, I suppose he just hasn't. He's not quite as familiar with the
With this
game, and
style,
that's
like the Shadowverse, Hearthstone,
yeah.
a game
And
all
I
around
think it's
trading.
I think it's partially due to the fact that he didn't have the second copy of Kuon that he really needed in order to really push for lethal on pivotal turns. And
Hmm.
I think if he lost momentum even a bit, it just ended up becoming an unwinnable game for him, and he'd eventually deck out if I didn't find a Lapis first. But yeah, that's how it seemed to me. He seemed to find the game quite enjoyable overall, though.
I think the
That
game is fun. I think there
is.
was a lot of potential with the game.
Oh,
I
I
think
think it
there's
still has
it
potential.
still has a lot of potential. There's just a few stuff that they need to just address. Let's say
Yeah, I think
the
so.
few
I think
stuff
I'd
they need
agree
to
with that.
address, and if they can in time, in a timely manner, saved, cinema, biggest
Perhaps.
comeback, generational comeback.
I mean, lingering resentment might still be there, I think,
I think there
and
will still be like if they were to fix it, there is still going to be trust issues with the company.
absolutely.
But I think the game, as a consensus, I've been seeing people say the game's fun
Mhm.
and seeing that it has the potential to be one of the best on the market right now.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's just these I don't even want to call them small, but just these issues that they need to address.
Yeah, I think I'd be inclined to agree with you
Yeah.
there.
But there's also a group that says that maybe the monetization isn't as bad as it's being thrown out to be. Maybe there's some overreacting, especially compared to old Shadowverse.
I mean,
But
if we go back to the whole thought on
yeah,
relativity, right? Like
yeah, it's
the
based off
truth is
experience.
probably somewhere in between there. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably not entirely in either camp, but somewhere along that gradient, right?
Yeah.
And uh, quite frankly, there's
Uh,
no way to know for certain. It's just all about perception. Um,
yeah.
but I think if enough people are perceiving that to be the case, there probably is an issue that needs to be addressed in some
Mm-hmm.
capacity. I mean, it's it's tough, right? Like, there's a lot of factors to take into account, I think. And I suppose you really do have to think about it from the developer's perspective as well. And yeah, it might just boil down to we need to get money to the shareholders, so give us your money.
Yeah,
Which, you know, would be a really unfortunate turn of events, but
it's
I
unfortunate
mean,
but fair. Everyone's got to pay the bills.
yeah, this wouldn't be the first time a card game has been ruined. Yeah, from
Maybe
greedy
first time anything's
executives.
been ruined. A game's been
Oh
ruined,
yeah,
and or anything really.
yeah.
So
Remember Sears? Jokes aside.
yeah, I
And
think bottom line to just not run with the crowd on what they say. Experience, try the game out. It's still fun.
I think so.
Maybe
Yeah.
don't mind the first week. Clear out the dailies. It's not like there's a rush to hit masters right away. There's no GM rewards yet or anything. Probably for the first bit, just because it's the first set. Learn the game,
Yeah.
and then over time, yeah, sure. Pray it'll improve.